Welcome. It is my great honor to welcome you to this special event. My name is Tiago Melauri. I'm director of Oxford Interfaith Forum, and we have a great honor of hosting Professor Habib and his book presentation. We are also very honored to have Professor Frank Griffel, professor of Abrahamic religions, who will chair the session, who will introduce the speaker, and then moderate the discussion and Q&A after presentation. So it is my great honor to hand over to Professor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. Yes. So I think what I understood from your presentation is when you actually hear the Quran, a verse translation, what you think about initially is, in this case, that this is rhyme. But what you just clarified is that you didn't put it into rhyme. Can you maybe, then you also mentioned in this case Saj, which is of course one of the features of the Quranic language in Arabic, which has rhyme.
Yes.
So did you use rhyme?
Yes, we did. One example of such might be Surah al-Duha, right? So if you want to break it down by Saj, it would be Wad-Duha. That's the first word. Then Wal-Layli idha saja. Second saja is 3 units. Ma wadda'aka rabbuka wa ma qala. Then it has 5 units. But the thing is, if you try to reproduce that in English, it's almost impossible, because the word duha in Arabic, right? It has a specific meaning. It's not just the morning, right? Because like if you say morning in England, you could be referring to like gray skies, right? But what is meant is the dazzling brightness of the morning, you know, from early morning until noontime. And so we had to use more than one word in English. So we said, by the morning light in its brilliance. But then it goes on, وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى. Then we said, by the darkening night in its stillness. So we have brilliance and stillness, and we have light and night. So we tried to do it to some extent, but you can't do it too much in English, because in English, if you have a rhyming every other line, and it's short lines, then it'll sound like a nursery rhyme. It'll sound like a ballad. And in my opinion, the only person who could ever have translated the Quran all into rhyme is Alexander Pope. And unfortunately, he's been dead for like 300 years. But he was a genius at rhyme. But you would need someone of that stature. I mean, I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I don't have the ability to do it. Right. It would require a great poet to do that.
Yeah. And you're right in this case also in the 21st century, if you use too frequent rhymes, it sounds cheap. Right?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. And you know, just to go back to your first point, Professor, a lot of people, they think that poetry is rhyme. You know? And so when you look at Hallmark cards, right, you know, the poetry of course is atrocious, but that's how they make it sound like poetry. They have all these very facile rhymes. You know.
And I know you didn't want to talk about other translations, but of course there are numerous out there, and so one of the things you might be familiar with in this case is some, you know, that we might talk about, because you know, he also, that translator is no longer with us, but he has left his monumental work, that is Arbery's translation, who also tried to convey something of, I mean, that was a very early, so to speak. You say there are 100 translations. You know, Arbery published his at a time when there were probably 4 or 5 overall in English, or maybe just a dozen. And Arbery also tried to convey the language of the. But if you compare yours to him, if you are roughly familiar with it, is there something you would like to comment on?
You know, Arbor is a translation that I admire quite a lot. You know, unfortunately, I don't have it with me. I have other people sampled from other people like Pixel here. I don't have Arboris in front of me, and I wouldn't need to have it in front of me to comment on it. But I do remember, you know, again, this is something that I said to you before, that I think translating the Quran has to be a collective endeavor. I don't think any one person can do it perfectly. And so we all contribute something.
Yes.
That we learn from that person, someone else, but it's an ongoing process. And the other thing that, you know, one day I want to write about this. A lot of people talk about the Quran as if it is an object, as if it is something dead, packaged, that is all finished. But it's not an object. I prefer to regard, and God, a lot of people talk about God as an object. You know, God is all finished, packed away, there's 99 names and that's it. No, but I think God is living. God is subjectivity. God is, to use a Hegelian expression, God is absolute subjectivity. And the Quran is the living expression of that subjectivity. So I think it speaks to every single one of us. You know, we can know what the traditional interpretations are, but nothing can substitute for your experience of when you read the Quran and it means something to you and it affects you. This is your interaction with the divine word, right? You know, and you know, same in prayer. We were saying how in our family, we were saying how many people are lonely today and are suffering from all kinds of, you know, and but prayer is a great form of therapy. I mean, who better to talk to than God, right? I mean, and you know, and so there is a sense, I think, that you're interacting with this, and it's not dead and buried. Right?
You're talking about Pixel's. He actually tried to rhyme, didn't he?
Yeah, I have his translation of Surah Al-Duha. So let's see. I'll just read the first couple of lines of ours again, so you can compare it.
Yeah.
Ours goes, by the morning light in its brilliance, by the darkening night in its stillness, your Lord has not abandoned you, nor does he abhor. For truly your ending will be better than your beginning. And then his goes, wrong surah. Surah Shams, actually. So ours goes, by the sun and her splendor, by the moon as she trails her, by the day as he displays her, by the night as she veils her. Now his goes, by the sun and his brightness, and the moon when she followeth him, and the day when it revealeth him, and the night when it enshroudeth him, and the heaven and him who built it. So, I mean, his is a little bit archaic. And again, we don't translate it into an archaic language, because when the Quran was revealed, it was revealed in the contemporary language of the Quraysh. It was not revealed in an archaic language. They could understand it, right? It was revealed in a language they could understand. So again, this is what I say about the Quran being a living text. We have to translate it into the idiom of our world, right? And then it could be that in 50 years' time, 20 years' time, people look back on ours and they'll say, hey, this is outdated, you know, we don't talk like this anymore, you know. And so it will be an ongoing project, right?
And who would you say is kind of the target readership that you were translating for? Is it particularly Muslims who want to engage with the text, or is it also non-Muslims who want to find out what the Quran actually says, or is it an academic readership?
Yeah. So actually, you made my answer very easy with your last part of your question. It's definitely not an academic readership.
Yeah.
I think this translation is just meant for like lay people, Muslims and non-Muslims. And for non-Muslims, it's a way of dawah, it means invitation, right? Call it invitation. So it's a way of inviting people into the beauty of the religion. And for both non-Muslims and for Muslims as well. I think young Muslims, I heard that in America is a 25% like dropout rate. I'm not sure if that's more than the Amish dropout rate for the Amish or not, but I think it's probably comparable. And because I think young Muslims especially, they need to see the Quran is relevant to our world, and that it speaks a language that they can relate to, So, but yeah, as far as, it'd be nice if academics like it. But that is not our primary audience, I mean, it's always good when Quranic scholars and Arabic experts like it. Of course, we are very, gratified when that happens.
Let me ask one more question. And you mentioned that when you were talking about the light verse at the lectern. You mentioned you were actually looking at several Quran commentaries, tafsir. So there is, you can say, generally speaking, among the existing Quran commentaries, there are two schools of thought. One is where you actually say, you translate it as it was read by the Muslim community, and how kind of, that looked at it later on. And the prime example is, of course, the study Quran, which is, has the translation itself, and then on the second half of the page has all these passages from various commentaries from the tafsir literature all through the centuries. As you say, in this case, from Tabari in the 10th century up to the 21st century to Maududi and others who have written about the meaning of the Quran. And then there are other schools of thought, and you might, for instance, our colleague here at Oxford University, Nikolai Sinai, who comes from the school where, it actually wants to understand the Quran from where it came, namely, late antique religious thought, and the language of pre-Quranic poetry, the language of the mu'allaqat, that actually ends up there. How would you, given the fact in this case that you referred to tafsir literature, to Quran commentary literature, and you were looking at it, how would you yourself place amongst these two traditions?
So I think my first answer would be that pretty much with any verse that we translate to, we try to translate it in line with what the mainstream tradition thinks. Sometimes, you get scholars who are like legal experts, or they're experts in a particular branch of Islamic studies or theology, and they say, well, this word has legalistic implications, and you need to, So someone asked me, for example, about Surah Al-Duha. They said, well, the Quraysh had, I can't remember what the question was, but they said the Quraysh had a specific understanding of this meaning. And I guess my answer to that would be that we didn't want to produce a translation which was esoteric. So yeah, it's quite possible that you could go back and you could have a very scholarly knowledge and produce a translation which is very esoteric, but which is outside the mainstream tradition. And it's not that I'm against that scholarship, because I think it's very valuable, but I think it needs to reach a kind of tipping point when that scholarship has permeated like the general community, the community accepts that, oh yeah, this is the correct reading of it, then I think at that point we would say yes, let's go with that. You know, now the esoteric interpretation has become the accepted one.
Yeah. So we open up the floor to questions to the audience. Professor Habib would be happy to respond. Well, let me thank Professor Habib, first of all, for the undertaking of the translation itself, together with Professor Bruce Lawrence, but also for coming here to Oxford and introducing his work and his translation to us. Thank you very much, Professor Habib. Thank you.